Welcome to the WakeUp Protocol. I am your host, Nadja Haldimann, and together we're having life-changing conversations with real people about spiritual awakening and the transformations that follow. We're mapping the messy path of awakening so you can go further faster and feel a little less alone along the way. For this episode of the WakeUp Protocol, we're joined by Titus Kahoutek, a coach, personal trainer, facilitator, and lifelong student of the human experience. He works with leaders, innovators, and teams, helping them reconnect with their bodies and minds so they can move through life with more presence and build relationships rooted in real connection. In this conversation, Titus offers us a gentle, spacious path back to what's actually real. We talk about how mushrooms helped him slow down enough to listen deeply, and how that listening became a gateway to trust, stillness, and embodied truth. We explore the difference between regulating the nervous system and finding safety inside the body, and why that internal sense of safety changes everything. Titus also shares his beautiful perspective on the soul, which he describes as a flickering, energetic presence that lives within us, constantly renewing, constantly alive. This episode is a quiet invitation to soften, to feel more deeply, and to remember that the body has always been the way back home. I hope you get as much from this conversation as I did, and that it opens something new in you too.
When I was 19, I took some mushrooms, and prior to 19, I was planning to be a Navy SEAL. I was going to go to ROTC and become an officer. But then I did have that psychedelic experience. And what was so profound during that is I just got the sense of subjectivity, that my perceptions are subject to my own beliefs, my own patterns. I can see the separation. I have to understand that other people might see it really differently than me, and that I don't know what's right anymore. And so I got more curious about what other people knew. And that kind of set me on more of a quest of just appreciating how powerfully malleable the interpretation of reality can be, and that we can use that to our advantage and disadvantage, and how that can be a tool is actually creating the story within our own self to work with the world in a better way.
Titus Kahoutek, welcome to the WakeUp Protocol.
Thanks for having me, Nadja. It's great to be here.
I've been looking forward to this conversation. I'm sure we're going to have lots of interesting things to talk about. We've known each other for quite a few years, and I've actually worked with you as a personal trainer when I had some physical ailments that the physical therapist couldn't work through. And through your practices, I was able to heal that within a short period of time. And what I really liked about you was how connected you are to the body and the mind. And I know one of the things that you like to talk about is the body-mind. And so I'm curious if you want to explain that a little bit, because it's a word that I learned from you first.
Yeah, I use the word body-mind just because it's always been problematic to me to separate our bodies and minds. Like, we have this physical thing, and this started with my pursuit of fitness and seeing that the body was just an instrument to push through for sports and as a tool to do what you want to do in the world. But something that was missing when I started working with people is that disintegrated relationship to the body, put the body as a possession, like my car, my house, my couch, my body. And so as a possessive, and especially as an item, people often forget that it is actually them. And so taking care of the body was like taking care of a car or a couch. It was a chore. It was something that you did, that you were supposed to do to take care of an object. And that was really difficult. And so I've been helping people to see their body as an expression of themselves ever since. You know, that integrating the body and the mind together really creates the healthy balance we're looking for. Mm-hmm. And then I want to step further into the story, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later. But that's where I got the body mind is I'd like to bring it into more of an integrated understanding, so people treat it as a relationship that's co-creative and codependent.
Yeah, I love that. To not just separate the body away from the mind. It's like, okay, I have a mind and I have a body and I have to work out my body, or I'm going to be using my body to achieve certain things, but that they're actually integrated. And what comes to mind too is the third word, soul. How does soul fit into all of that?
So a little bit of background about me is I grew up, my mom was very into metaphysics, spirituality of all kinds. We were going to alien chantings and drumming circles, and I was kind of exposed to a wide range of spirituality. But I also grew up with a Christian father where I spent a lot of time in the church, especially on Easter and holidays and things like that. And my mother's family was Jewish, so I spent a lot of time in temples and synagogues. And so I had a lot of exposures to different belief systems. And so the soul was a big part of my upbringing as far as the conversation. But my younger self, I rejected all of that because it felt really magical and unattached to reality in some way. And so I really got into the hard sciences. I got into biology and physics and chemistry to see how the world worked together on a material level. So as I went through my education, I got into a nutrition degree. And so we started learning about the Krebs cycle and ATP. And so this is my long answer to get to that question of what the soul is, because I always struggled with what is that? What is that animating force? And so when I learned about our Krebs cycle and how glucose is converted to ATP, and ATP is a magical molecule that runs our whole body. It's the energy of our body. And every time we do an action, a heartbeat, a flick of a finger, blinking our eyes, we're using ATP to do that. Mm-hmm. And ATP is converted to ADP after the reaction. So a phosphate bond is broken off. And in that phosphate bond breaking off, there's light, heat, and energy that's produced from that breaking of a bond. So I've kind of constructed an idea of the soul of all of those little flickering bonds breaking all simultaneously in different ways and patterns. And if I lift my arm, there's like a flickering energy that's going to be lifting my arm. Mm-hmm. So there's this kind of nebulous animating energy that is always on, and we always have to replenish it with what we bring in from the outside world. And so that relationship became a version or a view of the soul for me, because it's not gendered and it's not aged. It's exactly the same all of the time. No matter how old my cells are, that energy is new and fresh and constantly moving. Mm. And so that's kind of how I see the soul, is that flickering energetic presence.
I love that so much. Every time we have conversation, I just feel like my mind is blown, and just having you explain that, it makes so much sense, because the way I see consciousness or the soul or even source, there's this one place where all is happening simultaneously. And you talking about that ATP converting into ADP. And yeah, maybe that is where the soul is expressing itself in the now moment at all times. And there is no time and there is no age and there's no gender, but it just is. It's that energy, that life energy that comes
Absolutely.
through us.
And in the form of cat, it's cat energy, but the same ATP. In the form of dog, it's dog energy. Mm. So the genetic code kind of unfolds in that energetic pattern, but the energy that's running it, whether it's a bird or a dog or a dolphin, is the same. Mm-hmm. It's the same ATP to ADP conversion.
Yeah. Consciousness expressing itself through us in the physical realm and in that body-mind. Beautiful. I have another question about the body-mind. If the soul is what expresses itself and the body is what initiates it, then how does the mind fit into all of that?
This is a deep question, right? I think this is the exploration of consciousness, which hasn't been determined as to where it's coming from or how we're accessing it. It's still an open question. I think it's one of the big questions. Mm-hmm. So I guess what I have is my version of my exploration in it. But when I think of the mind, the language that we live in, the way that we see the world, the way that we interpret and create story around our experience, mm-hmm. and then how that drives our actions going forward. This is the mind. and I have a big part of that in the story realm of our body, mind, and story relationship. The mind has story which enacts through our body. And it's the interpretive interface between the story and the action. So that mind awareness, that big awareness that we get, yeah, is it a function of the body or is the body a tool of it? And I don't think we can determine that. And that's why I unified them. And I think that separating them might be useful for conversation, but ultimately confusing. Yeah. Because it's one thing. It's a synergy between biology and psychology and consciousness. And it's a mystery, and we're kind of in the mystery as we're creating the mystery at the same time. And that is an endless, fascinating pursuit for us personally. And I look at the body as one part biology. And like I said, I grew up in the hard sciences. I have a nutritional science degree. And so it's one part biology, which is just the facts of metabolism, cellular structures, bones, our anatomy, our physiology. It's very factual and material. We could point at it all. But it's only one part biology. It does have a biological reality to it. But it's two parts philosophy. And how we each see the world or interpret the world shapes our biology. And our biology is actually very fluid and plastic. But depending on our philosophy, what we believe is true about ourselves and the world, our biology will express differently and can change. And so if I grew up in France, for example, my biology would be genetically the same, but my face structure might be different because I'm speaking French. My tastes in food might be different, so it would express differently through my body. And so the genetics would be the same, but the expression would be completely different. Right. And so it's one part biology, two parts philosophy, and then a dash of mystery, like that unknown that we're all in. And depending on how somebody relates to the mystery. So if they have a tentative relationship to the mystery, their philosophies will tend to be more closed and rigid, a little bit more short-sighted. And then their biology would express as a little bit more tense, a little bit tighter eyes, a little tighter jaw. They would be in a tentative relationship. And so it would express all the way through the chain. And same with if you have an open, curious relationship to the mystery. The philosophies of that individual would most likely be more open, more questioning, more wondering. And then the body would be in similar fashion, more open, more expressive, more wondering. And so this relationship between our biology, our philosophy, and our relationship to the mystery is the crux of the work. And if we can align those things, if you can shift that, which isn't easy. Some people have a more tentative relationship to the mystery. They have a tighter philosophy. So we don't want to necessarily say you should be different either. It's just finding what is in alignment for that person.
Exactly. And different people expressing themselves in this world in different ways. Some more in the body, some more in the philosophy, and some more in the mystery. And some of them put all of it together in equal parts. But we get to choose the mix through which we want to experience life. I love that. We have talked a little bit before this podcast about spirituality and spiritual awakening. And you sort of challenged me a little bit on the word spirituality. And I kind of wanted to dive in a little bit deeper there.
I guess I have a mind that's geared towards integrating concepts. So in some ways, I just can't help it. And so I also have witnessed over time the commodification of spirituality, where spirituality is a style in so many ways. It's a clothing choice, it's jewelry choices. And so it's gotten spun into this other thing. So it's forced me to ask questions about that. And so what I think is the same thing with the disintegration of the body and the mind. When we say spirituality, it creates a separate category of ourselves, like our spiritual self. And it just got me thinking about the word spirituality as a distinct aspect of self, and that most indigenous people I know or that I've seen, like their practices of what we call spirituality, they wouldn't ever call something they're doing spiritual. They're just doing the thing, like they're just doing whatever it is because it's all integrated. It's not like they go to church to do that. They just do that in the normal function of their life. And Western minds have studied indigenous people and then extrapolated what they're doing and calling it spiritual. And then we have a lot of people saying, oh, well, then I'll do that spiritual thing and I'll do that spiritual thing, but missing the actual basics of just being a complete whole being, which is, of course, you're connected to everything. That's not a mystery, actually. That's just true. You're connected to everything and every star that has ever been.
Yeah. And I absolutely agree with you on that. In more traditional ways of living, that it's integrated and people are more in their bodies and they are more connected with nature and they are more connected to their communities because of the way the structure was set up. And yet we are in this world of technology and nuclear families and separation and loneliness epidemic and the obesity epidemic and all kinds of things that are happening in this time, and addiction to technology and the screen and separation from each other in a physical way. And I wonder if that's why, for me, the word spirituality has become a more important word to choose lately, because it might be something we need to point to. And how can we eventually integrate all of it again in a way that we all feel whole in body, mind, and spirit?
Yeah. I think it's critically missing. That's the irony of this whole conversation is I actually think that faith is the most important aspect of our being. I do believe in that. And that if we don't have deep and honest faith, it's very difficult to feel okay in the world. You know, and I think the spirituality you're talking about is that relationship to that belonging in the universe that we're all looking for. When we need it, we need to say we're in relationship to it all. And having no mechanism of it, I get why people are looking for it in all different ways. I just think as the commodification of it, there's a danger in it. What I've seen is that some seekers are more susceptible to actually the distractions.
Yeah.
And they love to buy spirituality, but you never access spirituality through what you buy or what you do. It's actually your relationship. And so whatever channel works for people to get there, I actually do support. And I would say that the saddest thing for me right now in this time is exactly what you're saying, is that we don't have a common understanding of our origin. And so we don't have a lot in the shared background of understanding that just is part of our culture. So each person has to find their own spirituality. And I think that kind of drives a wedge sometimes too, because then your pursuit of spirituality being different than their pursuit of spirituality actually separates people further. And that's where I struggle with it, because I think we need it and we need to have people guiding people there. However, there's just a danger in it.
Yeah. Thanks for explaining that. I would like for you to spend a little bit of time defining spiritual awakening. And if you want to replace the word spiritual, you're welcome to. Somebody called it a life quake.
Life quake, spiritual. I think it's really that when I first flashed into like the deepest observer possible, you know, that moment was a defining moment in my life. So there was a spiritual awakening where I felt in it and of it, and I understood being in it and of it, kind of like why maybe Rastafarians say I and I and I. There's a progressive level to my being, and there's this earth kind of 3D expression, but there's so many dimensions to what I am. At one level, I am the earth. You are the earth, right? We're the same material. At another level, I am the solar system, the whole one. And at the biggest level, I am the universe, the entire one. But in this particular form, I am a fraction piece of it. Another window through it. And that was a spiritual awakening, a sense of belonging in all of those dimensions, and an awareness of myself in those multiple dimensions and spaces, but also then seeing that every other person was that too. They are all that, you know, and not just every person, but all the trees and the animals and other planets as well.
Yeah. I like that I and I concept too, that you're explaining, and that awareness of being an expression, a window into something bigger and being all of it and just a fraction of it at the same time. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
Only that I used to think after I had that, I was like, oh, everybody should be awake, right? And I really was on a mission then to like, quote unquote, wake people up. But then I really did see how violating that can be. And some people like their default pattern so much because it's so safe. And when you take full accountability like that, like I am responsible for my life and outcomes and everything in it, that full accountability, some people don't want it. They don't want that. And it makes life much more difficult in some ways because you're accountable to all of those things. I really do choose to be, and I love working with people that also choose to be. But I also understand when people are on their own pace and why they might not want to be.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, that it does come with additional responsibility. And for some people, it really makes more sense to stick with what they feel safe in and comfortable in. And that's just as good as everything else.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And also, I've been in the community of the awakening spirituality for my whole life, like since I was born. And I love being in those spaces. I've also seen when people go to those other realms, sometimes they can't come back and ground it well in 3D. In actual life reality, the mundane of functional earth adulting in our time, it doesn't necessarily translate. And sometimes it makes it worse. And so for me, a lot of this 3D idea is a testing ground for those other dimensions of awareness. Like if they matter enough, it should create a more organized outcome in 3D, not a less organized outcome in 3D.
Yeah.
And so if it can't be grounded, it's not useful for me at this point. If I can and it works in 3D, then I'm like, that's awesome. I have validation of that.
Yeah, it's so true what you're saying and what I'm hearing from so many people I'm talking to. It's all love and light for that moment of the awakening, and then bringing that back and having a new window to a new possibility, and then trying to integrate that back into the existing life with the people around us, the profession we have, the habits we have, the programming we grew up with, the family we're in, and so forth. And also looking at the world, the way it is right now, it can be really disorienting. So this podcast is called the WakeUp Protocol, and protocol assumes that it's a step-by-step process, and it isn't. I'm thinking of it more like a deck of tarot cards rather than a book. You get a bunch of cards and you get to lay them out in any order that you want to, and then you get to tell a story. And one day go all the way to the world or the universe in the major arcana and have like the highest card, and then the next day you might lay the 5 of cups and feel really devastated again. It's more like a spiral than it is a linear path. And so like you might go through a round of awakening and get to that state and then come back and have to integrate again and go maybe just ups and downs, valleys, ups and downs.
Kind of sine waves of it all. And I think that in the process, you do realize, at least for me, is like that awakening happens, but then life happens. And it's not a downgrading. It's just that you're fine for a while. And then if you go through another awakening, what I've seen is I, and a lot of people I've observed, revert back to what they thought they got over. A new trigger triggers them the same way it did before, but it is a new level. And so sometimes even as we're going up through levels of awareness and capacities, we revert back to the old triggers and old responses to triggers that we've always had. In fact, they're like my best friends. They'll always be there when I'm in a process of transformation. And then I've learned to welcome that a little bit more and have a little bit more grace around the breakdown and rebuild process.
Yeah. Being human, it's so complicated.
So wild. It's so wild.
Somehow we chose to come through in this human body, and here we are.
I know. There's so many paradoxes and challenges, and it's also so beautiful. It really hasn't changed much. Like we say these times, but these times are those times, and there'll be the future times that are these times. And we go through the same sine waves in large society as we do in individuals. It's just they're bigger and longer waves that we have to be part of.
Just like a fractal experience of life, how it just kind of keeps unfolding the same way over and over again.
Yeah.
Have you had a pivotal moment of a spiritual awakening or multiples even?
There was a psychedelic experience when I was like 19. You know, I took some mushrooms, and prior to 19, I was planning to be a Navy SEAL. I was going to go to ROTC and become an officer. I was, no joke, singing the Star Spangled Banner at night. I was super gung ho because I grew up, like I said, in a very hippie family. So I was doing the rebellious opposite thing. I just went very conservative. It wasn't even that. It was like in the 80s. So it's hard to say what that was then. But then I went to University of Arizona, and I did have that psychedelic experience. And what was so profound during that is I just got the sense of subjectivity, that my perceptions are subject to my own beliefs, my own patterns. I can see the separation. I had a sense of like, oh, it's not actually how I see it. It's how I think I see it that shows up, you know, that reality is kind of subject to the story that I'm carrying, to the way I'm looking at it. And that I can't take what I see so seriously anymore. I have to understand that other people might see it really differently than me. And that I don't know what's right anymore. I just know what I know. And so I got more curious about what other people knew. And that kind of set me on more of a quest of just appreciating how powerfully malleable the interpretation of reality can be, and that we can use that to our advantage and disadvantage, and how that can be a tool is actually creating the story within our own self to work with the world in a better way.
Interesting. So the psychedelic experience really showed you that your perspective is just one perspective, but that there is multiple perspectives that are possible. And it gave you the opportunity to question that and get curious. What kind of questions did you start asking?
It was a longer unfolding process to now. I mean, I'm almost 50. That was when I was 19. And so the first kind of questions were just the righteousness, how right I felt about being in the military, about the American doctrine was very rich in my body. And when I went through that, I just saw that as that. It was something that I was told to feel. It wasn't actually how I feel. I actually have different opinions than that. And so that's where the questions really started. And then I was just more on a pursuit. I started reading a lot of philosophy. I started remembering all of my upbringing. And at that time, I was starting to take biochemistry and organic chemistry. And I was looking at molecules. And I remember learning all of the weird energetic stuff that my mom was teaching me. And that all of the religious things and the spiritual stories I learned about the Old Testament and Jesus and all that. And so then as I was learning science and kind of seeing it all as just a random flow of energy that's not quite random, it's actually governed on some principles that make it consistent and changeable, like, which is fascinating, that it's just all energy and density and sound working together. And that was where God became real to me. I was like, oh, there's so many layers of organization and chaos. There's no way we can know all this. And there's no way that, and I'm not even personifying a God. It's just that which I don't understand, like the level of organization that goes beyond my comprehension. Because all I know at that level, I trust there is an organization because it's evident at all of these other levels. And all the way and up, all the way down. Like when you start going in the body and looking at cells that turn into molecules, that turn into atoms, that turn into quarks, all the way down, we are as big as the universe inside as the universe is around us in many ways. And so that's stunning. That's stunning. And so it kind of contextualized it. And I appreciated the past versions of humans that were trying to understand the mystery. And the way they interpreted it actually wasn't too far off if you look at it mythologically, as a myth, not as a history, but as a mythology and a allegory of the unfolding. It's actually not too bad. I can see an overlay on different timelines, but not that bad. So then that kind of remembering brought it all together, being present to all of that.
Yeah, it's so interesting. There's so much to life and to reality. And the fact that you grew up with a mother who taught you the spiritual esoteric elements of life. And then you rebelled and became all scientific about it, and then started putting all the things together to become the person that you are today, which is a personal trainer, coach, really helping people connect that body, mind, spirit connection and live life in an embodied way. One of the things that I'm learning by talking with people is that originally I thought, before I started this project back in 2018, I thought that becoming spiritual means becoming disembodied, going outside of the body, finding something outside. And what I'm learning is that being spiritually awake actually means coming into the body. And it's a transition that I went through myself, working out more, doing more physical activities, grounding more, walking barefoot on the earth, going more into nature, putting better foods into my body, and all of that. I always thought spirituality is out there. It's the fifth dimension. The third dimension is here, and there's just this disconnect. And you're sort of putting all of that together and then really turning this into your profession to help people. And even the exercises I learned through your practices, these really subtle movements. Maybe you can talk a little bit about what these are helpful for, because I remember just micro movements to learn what neutral means and how important that is to learn what that neutral state is in the physical body.
Absolutely. I use the term millimeters matter a lot because just those little millimeters of shifts can make such a profound difference with how we're organizing our physical body against stress. When you're talking about movement, we're looking at stress or impact coming into the body and then how the body organizes itself in relationship to that impact and stress and gravity and how it's connecting to the ground and how we distribute that force. And so one of the awareness mechanisms we have is called proprioception. Proprioception is a body's awareness of where it is in space. So if you close your eye and raise your hand, do you know your hand is up? Right? And how do you know your hand is up? And so there's all of these mechanisms of communication within the body. And if you could imagine, you can make this a sharper and sharper skill. So somebody in Cirque du Soleil or a professional athlete, their levels of proprioception are that much greater. So you can take this to many degrees. But that ability to be aware of your body's position in space, that intercommunication, is a lot of the point. And it creates well-being through the whole body because the body's based in that communication. So when you have a movement practice and you're stimulating specific patterns like a press pattern or a pull pattern or a squat pattern, all of that intercommunication, the whole body is working the whole time. And so even the organs have to readjust how they're communicating through the legs as you're doing a squat. And so all of that nuance within the movement are access points to better communication between you and you. Right? Like your sense awareness of your body and your intellectual awareness of, oh, my body is here. And the quicker you can make the relationship between sense awareness and perception awareness, that's how quick you can respond to reality. So you can be more agile, more nimble, more available to respond.
What comes to mind too is there's a lot of anxiety and stress that people experience in their bodies, cortisol spikes and panic attacks even that people have. And the word regulating your nervous system is becoming a word I tend to repeat many times every day to myself and when I talk with others. And I know breath is one way to regulate the nervous system. How do you deal with helping people regulate their nervous system? I think I just want you to share a little bit for our audience to learn a practice that can help with that.
Absolutely. It's a really important question. So thanks for asking. And actually, I just finished a course through the Polyvagal Institute, PVI. Dr. Stephen Porges outlined polyvagal theory. And the more we're learning about the vagus nerve, its relationship to the autonomic nervous system, our stress autonomic responses or fight or flight, and the function of safety within that system, which is really powerful. And so when we talk about neuroregulation, most people think of the autonomic nervous system, well, even if they think about it at all, some people don't think about their autonomic nervous system at all, right? And so we have an enteric nervous system, all these different awarenesses that people aren't aware of. And so with anxiety, sometimes our body is sending signals of distress that our mind actually can't interpret and doesn't understand. The mind tries to suppress that stress, that signal from coming up. And then they call it anxiety, where that pressure meets the pressure of the mind trying to suppress it and the pressure of the body trying to make contact with the mind. And as you resist it stronger and stronger, that is the function of anxiety. So the anxiety isn't the feeling, it's the resistance to the feeling.
Oh, wow.
Right? How much energy and effort that nervous system is putting into not feeling its feelings. Right? And so a panic attack is when the body's really trying to send a signal and the mind's like, I really don't want to do that. And then it tries to split and vacate and disassociate from the body, and then it can't because you're in the body. So then that just spirals into a really unpleasant place, So that's the first thing, is learning to listen to the signals of your body and actually trust them.
What does that mean, trusting them?
Yeah, because the mind has interpreted those signals as a threat. I do not like this, right? And so any threat is going to make us feel unsafe and try to get away. And so this is when it's almost like, I call anxiety like an emotional autoimmune disease, because we become allergic or resistant to the very signals that our body is using to actually serve and support. And so as it's sending the signals up and the mind's like, I don't want to, that's burning a lot of metabolic energy, a lot, that's fight or flight. And fight or flight is only used for critical reasons, like actually chasing the gazelle and getting your dinner, or getting away from the lion because it's right there, And so those systems are used for very specific reasons, and they're metabolically expensive. So they cost us energy. And we need to be in the parasympathetic state, that rest digest state, to build all the resources that we need for our mobilized state.
Yeah.
Right? So when we say regulating, it's great in theory to say regulate your nervous system. But if your nervous system actually feels unsafe in safety, because safety isn't necessarily a place. It's not like it's any particular location that's safe. It's a state that the nervous system is in that is safe or not safe. And if you can feel safe, you can go into that parasympathetic state, and then you can build your resources, and you can learn how to be in that mobilized state only as little as possible. So there is obviously tools, but none of the tools matter unless the person can convince themselves or find a point of safety within themselves, not in the environment they're in, right? That they are safe within themselves. And I will say that it can be challenging, because actually letting yourself go into parasympathetic might be scary. So it takes practice. It takes mechanisms to build that up. And a lot of the ways you mentioned, like breathing, that's one way to create safety in the moment, because you're taking a full breath and you actually have access to air. And you probably, if you have time to breathe, you should recognize that there's nothing dangerous around you in this moment. Maybe your thoughts are dangerous. So let go of the thoughts. Let them be there. Not that they stop, but don't connect. Right? And maybe it's your sensations. Lean into the sensations and even let that be safe in that moment. And you can take a breath. And it's moving towards safety that is the regulation. So however you can create safety is the goal. And this is working out, this is fitness, this is how you go for walks. All of these are regulating mechanisms, but it's also to reinforce safety.
Yeah.
Right? So every practice we do, and I kind of call it a practice palette. So every morning we wake up and we have our practice palette. Physical practices, nutritional practices, spiritual practices. I do separate it there, right? Maybe we meditate and pray. There's professional practices, social practices, relationship practices. So we have all of these practices, and there's no rules. You do whatever you want. But if you fill your days with your practices, it gives you a number of benefits. One is really solid safety, because you know what your day looks like. There isn't a lot of uncertainty. I know what my day is. I build a day. And if you build your day beautifully from morning to night, it has all of those practices in it. You can rest assured that you did everything you did to keep your tomorrow safer. You already did that.
That's beautiful.
Yeah. And so it's our practices, our baseline, our drum beats that keep us really safe. And that's the key word, right? Because if we don't feel safe and you're always in fight or flight, you burn the candle until you get home, you crash, do something to feel okay, maybe drink, maybe smoke, maybe whatever you do, that's where people do. And then they crash and then they wake up feeling unsafe, spike all day, crash. And you can't be on that cycle because it's just catabolic. It's just breaking the system down. To be in an anabolic cycle, we have to be in a sense of safety. And what's cool with that is when you feel safe, the fight or flight mechanism itself is everything we love about life. When you feel safe, when you're in fight and flight, imagine you're in a neighborhood playing tag with all of your friends. You feel safe and you're literally playing fight and flight. And it feels so good. And so does work. And so does everything else. You can really get into fight or flight and love it. Right now, if you feel unsafe, fight or flight is everything bad in the world. And if we feel unsafe in the world, it's our whole life.
Yeah, so creating that safety in our life. And what I'm really hearing is creating an intention for the day and a set of practices and a routine so that we have a predicted way to go about our days and work towards a future that is increasingly more safe so that we can have these amazing fight or flight moments that are exhilarating because they're adding more spice to life rather than more anxiety in a way that it feels really uncomfortable in our bodies.
Yeah, exactly. And I just want to really stress the point of safety is not a place. It's not like we can make this world safe. The world has never been safe. It's not intended to be safe. It's the world. It's our job to build safety within our worlds. And it's not even safety forever in perpetuity. It's for this moment.
Yeah. Lots to think about. And I might ask you some more follow-up questions at some point in the future, but that's a really beautiful answer. I know you work with people one-on-one, and I want to give you a chance to share what you do and how people can find you.
Yeah, I coach and I train. So the distinction between coaching and training is, I have years of expertise in movement and functional fitness and corrective exercise. And I love the body itself as an expression. So I do help with personal training, fitness, and then coaching as well, which is a little bit deeper because we're looking more at the story behind the actions. We're looking at the cosmological makeup of you as a person, and then offering transactional practices to move you towards a desired outcome that you really want. And so coaching is a little bit deeper dive into who you are, and training is more of a transactional opportunity to test who you are and to strengthen who you are, but not necessarily transform who you are. That's going to come through the coaching.
Yeah. And do you have a website or how can people reach you?
Yeah, you could reach me at titus@kahoutekcoaching.com. And so my website is www.kahoutekcoaching.com. It's my last name, coaching.com.
Okay, and I will make sure to put the link into the show notes. Yeah, we're coming to the end of this conversation. I could go on for a long time, and I'm sure we'll talk again soon.
Well, thanks for having me.
Yeah, I have one final question for you. If you could go back in time and give a message to a younger version of you, what would you tell him?
I guess it depends on the age, but a younger version of myself, probably my 16-year-old self, that I'm more and less important than I think I am. And that service is really the highest form of expression.
Beautiful message. Thank you so much, Titus. Really enjoyed this conversation.
Thanks, Nadja. It's great to be with you.
Thank you so much for tuning into the Wake Up Protocol. If you like what you heard, share this episode with 3 people who need to hear this message. And if you want to go deeper, head to thewakeupprotocol.com and sign up for our email list. That's where we share behind-the-scenes insights, bonus resources, exclusive invites, and the kind of guidance we only send to our community. And if this is the last thing you hear from us, all we'd like to say is keep going. Trust yourself. Follow your heart. Until next time, have a safe and happy journey.